Good evening, everybody. How is everybody today? I'm hoping everyone is well. And welcome to the second episode of The Liberty Generation with myself, Mitch Broderick. Today, I wanted to focus on the topic of self-esteem, which is actually a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about. Many people who are close to me know that my ultimate career goal is to be a professional speaker who basically goes around college campuses, high schools, and business consulting and talking about personal development, namely self-esteem and goal setting. So I've kind of delved into the last 4 years learning as much as possible about it, and I guess the big name that really comes out for most people whenever the name self-esteem comes up would be Nathaniel Branden, who, well, he's the guy. So what I wanted to start with today is first, I wanted to make sure that anybody who's viewing can write comments down, and I wanted to make sure I was capable of reading them. So that if there were any questions, etc., it would be rather simple for me to get to that input and discuss it. Again, the purpose of the Liberty Generation is to bring to the perspective of the Liberty Movement, what's not often talked about, which is that we're not all perfect people. Obviously, we have a philosophy that we know is a great message, and it's voluntarism. It's the idea that we can peacefully coexist. But that said, most of us lack personal development, myself included, in the sense that we're all people who should not stop growing. We should not stop learning. We should not stop introversion and making sure that as a person we are being as respectful to ourselves and to others as we possibly can. So that's what my show is going to be about. It's going to be about the emotional side, because honestly, I think that as much of I don't think reason and emotion are adversarial. I think actually the fact that one is reasonable and that one uses reason, the reason of their functioning mind, makes emotion so much more powerful. So I would like to offer up the first sort of question. That's what my show is going to be about. It's going to be about the emotional side. I just had a mind trip because I was trying to read the comments that are on the actual YouTube channel, and it looks like there's like a 20-second time delay. And so when I brought up the window, it was what I said about 20 seconds ago. I did not know that previously. I guess that's not going to work. I'm prefacing everything about what I'm saying today with, I'm still learning how to do everything, and I hope none of you can hold that against me. So the very first thing I wanted to have, prefacing this as well, I wanted to have some interaction going on here, but evidently I'm not doing it correctly yet, and that's not going to happen. So next week I will have that worked out and figured out. Before I go into the main thing, I encouraged people last week to have a drink in hand. And in case my wine glass emptied, I just have the bottle here. So, cheers. I mentioned in the name that we're going to be talking about why self-esteem is the root of people who are liberty-oriented. Why is it so important? And in a simple sense, people have always asked me, or I've always told people for the longest time, I want to go into politics or I want to be a lobbyist because I want to bring change about that way. And about 3 years ago, after I graduated high school and was really delving into the anarchical ideas and whatnot, it became apparent that that is not a job that I was going to enjoy in any sense. I saw politics as something that was completely, baseless, unprincipled, and compromising. I wanted nothing to do with it, and I still want nothing to do with it. And so I had to kind of look into myself and say, so what does that mean? If I want to make a political change, what does that mean? And most anarchists have come to the realization, or have realized that what's going to change is societal change. So the more that we can bring people around intellectually, the more that's going to reflect in our political institutions. And so thinking about that, knowing that I'm somebody who, one, is incredibly motivated and loves helping people and motivating them as well and being inspirational and being passionate about self-esteem, I decided, what is the root of liberty? And the root of liberty is undoubtedly self-esteem, because the person with self-esteem has, one, a mind that they respect. Number two, they're respectful of others, because you cannot be respectful of yourself and then not respectful of others. It simply doesn't work that way. In the same sense that you can't love someone else if you don't love yourself. You have to love yourself first, and whenever you do love yourself first, then most of us have come to realize there's an abundance of love that you can pass out to other people. So why is it that I'm so passionate about self-esteem, and how do I think I can change the liberty movement like that? I think if I were to be able to give a keynote speech in front of younger generations, and I know I am the younger generation right now, looking ahead 5 years, going to college campuses or high schools and business development conventions, etc. If I'm able to give a speech where I'm discussing the importance of self-esteem, and I'm talking about real self-esteem and not what is often sold to the masses today, which I would simply call pseudo self-esteem, then it becomes a rather easy thing to bring them around to liberty, because think about it. Self-respecting people respect property rights. Self-respecting people respect the notion that other people should be free to do with their lives what they wish, so long as they're not hurting somebody else. So it's really not that big of a jump to initial libertarian thought if you're somebody of self-esteem. And then once somebody is in libertarian thought, in reality, the difference of degree is moot, so long as we have people from all different angles working towards the common goal of less state institutions involvement in all of our lives. And so the reason why self-esteem is the inherent tracker of that is, well, people who respect property happen to be our friends. We happen to know that most people respect property, at least their own property, if there's no government involved. For instance, most liberals would not hand you their wallet if you asked them for it, and likewise, they're not the people who are contributing the most. These damn lights. So with that said, I think what we can look to is, within our liberty movement, what does self-esteem mean? And how many people actually have it? I know that there's still a lot of education I have to get and attain within the liberty movement, and I consider myself a pretty educated, well-read, and stout anarchist, objectivist. And I know a lot of people, when they hear that, are going to say that that's a contradiction of terms, and that's a conversation for another. That's a conversation for another day. My boyfriend Tom is distracting me, and he made me lose my train of thought. He was very sweet and got me a glass for my wine. So, lost my train of thought, and I apologize. I really wish I had the comments working. Alas, I'm going to have to keep talking. What does that's where I was at. What does self-esteem look like in our movement? Because there are so many people who have these ideas, and they might have self-esteem as a question of degree. And there's no such thing as too much self-esteem, but there is such a thing as too little self-esteem. You can be a part of the libertarian movement simply because you're a reasonable person and you've reasoned that it's wrong to initiate force against somebody, but you can still be depressed. I know plenty of libertarians who have had very little self-esteem and who have, not really understood why. They just simply understand that it's wrong to initiate force or to use the government middleman to initiate force for you. So I think that applies to so many libertarians because I meet them all the time. I meet people who haven't gotten to read the Nathaniel Branden books or so many other, we'll classify them as self-help books, but I typically like to read them from accredited people rather than like Joel Osteen. No offense if you, well, yes, offense if you are a fan of Joel Osteen. I don't like to read them from people who I view as hypocritical of the values that they are showing. And that said, I think Nathaniel Branden, if you aren't aware of who he is, he was sort of a understudy of Ayn Rand back in the day, literally. And they had a falling out, but he got his doctorate in psychology. He's a world-renowned psychologist, and he pioneered the study of self-esteem. And it was largely based in objectivism, because one of the sole tenets of objectivism is reason, purpose, and self-esteem. So that we can, those make for a philosophy that is in line with people living on this earth. And Nathaniel Branden is an excellent, profound writer, and whom I believe to be the model objectivist, because the way his writing flows, it takes out the a-hole element that Ayn Rand had in her writing and replaces it with this kind, understanding, wonderful view of humanity and of oneself. And so Nathaniel Branden's biggest book, or most renowned, is called 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, where he's basically talking about the 6 biggest factors that attribute to high self-esteem, and those pillars are in order, the order that he lists them chronologically in the book are 1, the practice of living consciously, the practice of self-acceptance, the practice of self-responsibility, the practice of self-assertiveness, the practice of living purposefully, and finally the practice of personal integrity. So what do those mean? The practice of living consciously is something that really hits home to me, because it's something I've always strived to do. One example would be that I'm constantly evaluating if I'm making the right choices, maybe right choices in a career path, right choices in relationship factors, friends, family, etc. and the right choices as far as philosophy goes. So uh, people might call me stubborn, but I'm actually harder on my views than the hardest liberal or the hardest communist could ever, the hardest leftist, I'll say. I'm not going to say liberal. That's a word I want to take back, as well as selfishness. So living consciously is quite simply the practice of it's of making sure that you're constantly evaluating that which you are doing with your life, and that you are being honest with yourself about what's working and what's not working. So living consciously, an example would be two people who are in a relationship together that's been stagnant for years, and they are unhappy, both of them, but neither of them wants to tell the other because they're afraid of hurting the other one's feelings. Living consciously stipulates that once that unhappiness is found, you have two choices. You're either going to make the decision to have a conversation and attempt to revitalize the relationship and revitalize the love that was once there, or you're going to have the conversation where you both admit to one another you're unhappy and that you feel you should simply go your separate ways. And that also ties into a few of the others, but it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's much harder to do in practice. Living consciously is the person who goes after their goals and desires without inhibitions. Moving on to the practice of self-acceptance, there is a gorgeous line in the novel on the practice, or it's not a novel, in the book, where Brandon goes on to say, we can run not only from our dark side, but also from our bright side. From anything that threatens to make us stand out or stand alone, or that calls for the awakening of the hero within us, or that asks that we break through to a higher level of consciousness and reach a higher ground of integrity. The greatest crime we commit against ourselves is not that we may deny or disown our shortcomings, but that we deny and disown our greatness because it frightens us. So the practice of self-acceptance goes along with living consciously, completely hand in hand, in the sense that a personal example, living consciously was me evaluating a decision in a personal relationship with my girlfriend of 3 years, in the sense that it wasn't fulfilling to me sexually because I was gay. I was in the closet, and I was in there for some time, in a sense, because it was denial. I was denying a very big part about me. And so once you acknowledge that, the burden is lifted, and whenever you're honest with yourself about everything, it makes life so much more easy. But on the flip side, had you been honest with yourself the entire time, you completely avoid the pain that you're going to cause other individuals. It is not conducive to your growth, most importantly, but also it is not conducive to the growth of the other people around you if you evade the reality of who you actually are. And that also means if you evade the necessity of undergoing the introvertive process that is required for you to figure out who you actually are. It can sound cliche, and I hate the cliche of be who you are, because it's not enough. Whenever you say be who you are to somebody, it's window dressing. Most people have no clue who they are. But be who you are, they're going to go for the first shallow thing that they can reach for. So self-acceptance it's a very profound principle, because I would estimate that fewer than 80% of people I messed up that statistic. Fewer than 20% of people really know who they are. The third pillar of self-esteem would be self-responsibility, which goes to the idea that, somebody who is responsible and admits that, they are responsible for their choices and actions, which means that they're responsible not as the recipient of moral blame or guilt, but responsible as the chief causal agent in your life and behavior. There's somebody who's going to be prone to libertarianism. You don't ever have to talk politics with somebody who is working towards building self-esteem. You don't have to talk about the political side at all. It will fall in line throughout. Self-esteem is the ultimate seed that turns into a root and eventually a tree of liberty. And there is no substitute. It is the foundation for, I'm willing to bet, every one of us, all 8 people listening right now, I'm sure. So self-responsibility is pretty straightforward. The person who is responsible for oneself, they're probably going to feel pretty good about what they're doing in their life. The other aspect, the fourth one, is the practice of self-assertiveness, which is simply to live authentically and to speak and act from one's innermost convictions and feelings, but as a rule, as a mandate. It's the whole idea that you're real. You have to remember that to be authentic is to literally be the author of your own story. You're somebody who is, I guess the best way to say it is, you're not working towards living up to anyone else's expectations, save your own. That's the idea of self-assertiveness. It's not the idea that you're a jackass to everybody around you. It's simply that you don't have time for others, for the expectations of others to play on where you're going. The fifth pillar I'll discuss briefly. It ties in with living consciously, and it's the practice of living purposefully. And Nathaniel Branden has a great line on this as well that I simply have to say because I can't articulate it better. Branden writes, "To live purposefully is to use our powers for the attainment of goals we have selected. The goal of studying, raising a family, starting a new business, solving a problem, or building a vacation home, or sustaining a happy romantic relationship. It is our goals that lead us forward, that call on the exercise of our faculties, that energize our existence." To put it more bluntly, Ayn Rand wrote, "Grow or perish." To grow, you have to be working towards a worthwhile goal at all times. They can be small goals at a time, but you simply have to be working towards something all the time. Otherwise, it's pretty obvious. Time goes by, and you wake up one day wondering, 1, where did it all go? 2, what did I do with it? 3, what do I have to show for that time? And you have nothing. This is likely, in society today, the pillar that I think is the most depressing, because I look around, I meet so many people I've waited on as a waiter and working in the food and beverage industry. I've waited on so many people, and in college met so many people who have no purpose. They couldn't tell you what they want to do in 5 years. One example is the students who are in college because they figured they would take the time in college to figure out what they want to do. And I'm sorry, but if you don't know what you're passionate about, what you are passionate about as an adult, you are way behind in your development. And I don't think 4 years of college and racking up debt is going to help you. I think it's setting the stage for taking a job that is mediocre to what you're actually interested in, and that you will inevitably be miserable at, but you will accept it because it's less risk. It's less risk. I hate my goddamn lisp. It is less risk for someone to take something that they're mediocre at, or that they are okay with working at because it provides an income, than it is for them to take the time and be profoundly honest with oneself in figuring out what it is that they are passionate about, what it is that they want to do for a living, what they want to make their life about. The last pillar that I'll discuss before closing out is the practice of personal integrity. And basically, integrity is the integration of ideals, convictions, standards with behavior. When our behavior matches our the values that we profess, and when the ideals and the practice match up, that's when we have integrity. So I think integrity is something that's self-explanatory, but again, there's very little of. And that's where the whole idea of pseudo self-esteem comes in. We have these words of practicing personal integrity, living purposefully, self-responsibility, self-acceptance, living consciously. All of these things are such obvious pillars to building self-esteem, but they could be so cliche that they just simply turn into pseudo self-esteem. People like to say that they're responsible. They like to say that I'm living consciously. They like to say, yes, I'm assertive and living my life how I want to. I accept myself for who I am. I have integrity, etc. They don't mean it. And the person with self-esteem sees right through it. They know that that person A doesn't mean it because they don't know what it is. They were never actually taught what it is. They don't have any real-life experience with integrity, with purposeful living, with self-assertiveness, with self-responsibility, and especially with self-acceptance. So, how do I think I can change the liberty movement? By spreading the ideas of real self-esteem. Obviously, it starts with oneself. And that means I must live with integrity, though at times, as any of us would, it may lack. I have to live purposefully. I have to live responsibly, accept who I am, and live consciously. And when you do that, it can rub off on others because you attract the people who, one, need that the most, and two, who are like that. So people want to be friends with people who are A, either like them, or B, like how they want to be. And so by me basically preaching these ideas to people and really getting at the heart of what each of them means, rather than simply scratching the surface, it has the ability to make an extreme effect on what one views the world philosophically, or how one views the world philosophically and politically down the road. I'm not looking for an all-night conversion of somebody into the ideas of libertarianism and ultimately, anarchy. I'm looking to make someone respect themselves more. That's all I want to do. I want somebody to love themselves. I want somebody to live purposefully and consciously. And I want them to have integrity. And that's all I want out of people. And I know that transfers over into every other aspect of one's life. Libertarians, anarchists need not ever discuss politics or philosophy in the academic sense to convince somebody that the ideas are correct. They simply need to convince somebody that they should love themselves and respect themselves That's why self-esteem is the foundation of the liberty movement. Thank you for those of you who stuck with me and listened to my banter. Um, Again, I hope next week to have a way to communicate with you and have you interact and offer feedback and express ideas. Uh, and I appreciate you listening. Have a good night. Cheers.